Hey everyone, thanks for checking out this first ever book episode that we're doing on the show. This is Quentin Tarantino's Cinema Speculation. This is part 1 of 2, so we're talking about the first half, and we also have a part 2 coming later this month. But if you enjoyed this episode and can't wait for that part 2, it's available now exclusively on our Patreon at patreon.com/almostcultclassics. So if you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more right away, check us out on Patreon. Hello and welcome back to Almost Cult Classics, the podcast. My name is Joe Ramone, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host Ryan Lancello.
Howdy, folks.
And today we're doing our first ever book episode on Quentin Tarantino's Cinema Speculation. I guess it's a more of a memoir / essays on his experience kind of growing up in the 70s and 80s, seeing a lot of these movies for the first time, kind of the experience he had seeing film and how he became such a cinephile. And there's 13 movies, I think, that take up basically their own chapter. There's a few chapters in between, but for the most part, it's just essays on these movies. And it's good about Quentin is he kind of has talked to some of the people that made these movies.
Yeah,
so
a lot of them.
He gives a good perspective on that. And honestly, parts of it reminded me of the podcast we do, where it's like he picks a movie that's not super appreciated for the most part. There's a few, obviously, classics in here. And then he kind of talks about the making of it, what else the director did. So it's kind of interesting in that regard.
Yeah, it is. The book's a lot of it's kind of him just like bullshitting with the reader almost about movies. I recommend the book.
Yeah.
I wasn't even going to read it. And
Yeah.
you were like, hey, I'm going through this book. It's pretty good. I'm like, You're like, no.
Yeah, well, you had heard some criticism, I think, right?
Right, yeah. And what's the rule? Don't listen to critics.
Don't listen to critics.
I'm as stupid as everyone else. I get wrapped up into it too, but I'm glad I picked it up.
What was the criticism you heard that put you off?
It was just rambling. It's the same criticism people always make of Tarantino, that he's a rambling guy, but like it works in the book.
Yeah, I don't think anyone picks up this book that doesn't expect that's going to be the case here.
Right.
Because it's a lot of that.
And it's like you said, it's interesting. You can see how one thing that really jumped out at me is because we don't live in this era now, movies used to really be a thing. Like, what else were you doing? Like, he was at the movies all the time because why not?
Especially like double bills and things like that. He was going,
bills, all that shit. And there's one part in here where I don't know if I talks about this is going to be an interesting one because we got to go through like the book almost page by page. But he talks about all the adult movies he was seeing, and one really jumped out. Just imagine a young Tarantino seeing Sunday Bloody Sunday.
That's great.
I don't know if you are familiar with that at all.
I am.
It's just too funny.
Yeah, and before we started recording, I was talking to Ryan. There's a lot of movies we have talked about in passing that are mentioned in this book. Someone on Letterboxd put out a list of just every single movie mentioned, it's immense.
Oh, there's
Yeah. I mean, you'll find yourself. I gave this book a good review, and I was basically just saying that you'll discover so many movies that you might have been on your radar, but others that you had never heard of. There's certainly the main movies in this book I would never have seen. There's a few of them I would have never have seen had it not been for the book. So it's a good chance to, revisit some classics, but also discover some movies you might have otherwise missed. But before we get into it, go chapter by chapter, how many of these movies had you seen prior to reading this?
maybe half.
Okay.
And then like you were saying, like there was a lot of ones as I'm going through it. I'm like, shit. I'm like, he's talking about Burt with Deliverance, Burt Reynolds, and I'm like, well, fuck, I've never seen Smokey and the Bandit. So I watched that. Then he's talking about Joe Don Baker throughout the book. I'm like, I've never seen Walking Tall.
Yeah.
I watched that. Then he really likes Don Siegel, the director.
He does.
Which after watching these movies, so do I.
Yeah.
Don Siegel's fucking awesome.
Did you watch The Beguiled?
I didn't.
You should check that one out.
I will. But what's it called? I watched like Charlie Varick. And then from there, I'm like, I started watching all these Walter Matthau movies, Hopscotch and Bad News Bears. And then I must have I guess I never saw Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's like a perfect fucking movie,
it's
man.
Great.
It's really, really good.
I think I saw it for the first time 2 years ago. And it was like, that last scene, it leaves you kind of just speechless. You're just like, I think I even put on Letterboxd, I was like, they just don't make movies like that anymore.
No.
It's just every turn is surprising and exciting.
And it's a really good movie because New York's a character.
Yeah.
And you can it seems spatially where they're going. We got to go over here. We're going down that. Like it really, you can feel it. And all the denizens of New York are there. It's fucking great, man.
So going into this book, I had seen Bullitt, I had seen Dirty Harry, I had seen Deliverance, hadn't seen The Getaway, The Outfit, Sisters, or Daisy Miller. I had seen Taxi Driver, had not seen Rolling Thunder, had not seen Paradise Alley, but had seen Escape from Alcatraz and Hardcore, and had not seen The Funhouse. So it's half and half.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, there's a lot here that I had seen years ago and just wasn't thinking about.
And you can just spin off. Like, you start, like, oh, Don Siegel, then it's like, well, I got to watch this. I got to watch that.
Yeah.
I got to, you know.
Yeah, if anyone's going to get this book, obviously the way to do it, I actually even recommend, like, Bullitt's the first one. So watching Bullitt, reading that chapter, watching that, like, keep them fresh in your mind and then read the book.
I was burning through the book, and I got to about, like, the second or third chapter. I was like, whoa. Yeah. I did exactly what you said. I started to watch the movie, then read the chapter.
Even though I'd seen these movies before, I was like, I need to rewatch them.
Totally worth it, too. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely.
It made the book that much funner to read. And the guy knows his shit.
Absolutely.
Where do you stand with him? We've talked about this before.
I think he, like I said, I love his infectious love of movies. I think that's really cool. He's doing that podcast now.
Heard it's
pretty good. Yeah, he did.
Listened.
He did an appreciation of Gene Wilder's Haunted Honeymoon, which is, again, he talks about these movies that people might not be familiar with. So it's kind of nice to see that. But yeah, I don't like what he's doing right now, which is I'm going to retire. I'm going to do 10 films and retire. Whatever. I think that's like a little bit egotistical to...
Look, the guy, in my opinion, has never made a bad movie. So if the next one, which is going to be The Movie Critic, apparently...
I think, yeah.
God, what timing on this?
Yeah.
But,
what's your favorite movie of his?
Jackie Brown.
Easy.
And my biggest bummer with him is after Jackie Brown, it wasn't a huge hit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it did okay, I think, but it wasn't the hit he was looking for. He kind of abandoned, for lack of a better term, realism.
Yeah.
For, like, more outlandish shit. Which
does a lot of revisionist stuff.
It's fine.
And, yeah.
But, like, Kill Bill is, like, it's good. I like Kill Bill, but...
Yeah. I can't... See, I saw Kill Bill only for the first time a couple years ago as well, and I was, like, kind of surprised how boring part 1 is. I mean, part 2 is, like, you know, it really picks up.
That's weird. I think people say the opposite.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought part 1 ends with the big, like, samurai showdown, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Well, she fights the crazy 88s.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't that the ending?
Pretty much.
Okay. I just remember I enjoyed part 2 a little bit more. I thought there was a little bit more happening. But yeah, overall, I like Tarantino. I think he has really interesting opinions. This article just came out a couple days ago where he was saying that Crystal Skull is better than Last Crusade, which is a very interesting opinion.
It's a bold statement.
He also liked The Lone Ranger, and that movie came out, and not a lot of people
He was a big supporter of that.
Yeah.
Which I saw some scenes from that. I've never seen the whole thing, but I'm like, maybe he's onto something.
It's an interesting movie. It's a little too long, but...
I could see that too. But Gore Verbinski goes for it.
Yeah.
Visually, at least.
So I genuinely, I do like him. I think sometimes he can be a little eccentric and an acquired taste. I wish he had done more adaptations, because like you said, I think Jackie Brown is a... That
was the other thing. I think, I don't know if he's ever admitted it, but I think he was a little butthurt over the fact that he didn't come up with the story. Like, people could be like, yeah, that was great, but,
Elmore Leonard.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, fuck that. Like,
he's obviously, going through this book, he continually talks about some of these crime, pulpy novels that he grew up reading. So it's surprising that he only did that one.
He's well-read.
Yeah.
He's seen every fucking movie. The guy has seen every movie. You can't take that from him, and he can recall it.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's a book. You could sit there and research and stuff, but I guarantee you he could just do it like that.
Yeah, he just knows who directed what year, what came after.
He's a historian. You can't say he's not, and he makes good fucking movies. They're entertaining. And like you said with the revisionist thing, at the very least, when we'll get to it in this, but it's missing from film right now. He talks about like the worst eras were the 50s and the 80s. And
yeah, he hates the 80s. I was surprised at that.
It's a little weird. I can understand where he's coming from, but right now is the worst.
Yeah.
Easy.
For sure, yeah.
We live in it's like Soviet.
Yeah.
It's like everything's sanitized and weird and just false. Everything seems phony right now and very pessimistic. And that's one thing I'll say about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's an optimistic film.
Yeah.
We need that now. We need something like a Rocky. Mm-hmm. You really need that, and it's totally missing. There is nothing like that because everyone's so fucking irony poisoned.
We don't need a Paradise Alley, that's for sure.
I think we could probably do without a Paradise Alley.
Before we get into it, though, real quick, a lot of people I feel like might pass up this book based on the cover because it's very simplistic. Mm-hmm. It is Peckinpah, who I always say sounds like a W.C. Fields character, Samuel Peckinpah, and McLean. And I hate this celebrity memoir where it's like just their face and they're just kind of like
I do, yeah.
With that like light blue, it's soft coloring. I hate that. I like to hear it's just like orange, white, black and white photos of Steve McQueen and Sam Peckinpah. Kind of really sets you up for the mood. So, and then we begin with little Q watching big movies,
and he just talks about how he was a kid and his mom would take him to like everything. And, you know, you can tell that's where it started. That's why I just can't get over the fact. Just imagine like a 7-year-old Tarantino sitting there watching Sunday Bloody Sunday. And he's like, I don't really know what's going on, but it's the idea of, and this is how I felt as a kid. I've talked about this before, is that you're seeing what adults see. And it's whoa, and you feel like you're in the world. And he says, he's like, I knew when I was in the theater, shut my fucking mouth. He's like, don't ask questions. That's for the car ride home. You know what I mean? Like, sit there because they won't take me anymore.
Yeah.
And
it's a privilege.
Right, exactly. Man, it must have been so awesome to live in a movie.
Yeah, to live in LA, especially in the
just
70s and like
but anywhere, just the culture of film being a thing. It's a complete product now. There's no artistic.
During like Taxi Driver and Hardcore, you get to see some of these places that, I mean, those are more like seedy, but there were like entertainment districts in like cities where like you had multiple theaters, you had you know, crummy low rent porno shops, but you also had like movie palaces and things that did triple bills. And
one of these days we should talk about how I went into the Forum.
Yeah,
which I think may have been the last porno theater. I don't want to say in the country.
Yeah,
but it was one of the last.
It's definitely the last one in this area.
You probably.
Yeah,
it was like a theater with seats. Like
one of the first movies he mentions in here is Joe, which is a movie that had been on my radar for so long because of that poster. Because it's just Peter Boyle with a shotgun, and doesn't even say like "Make America Great Again."
It might say that.
Yeah. It really shows that history kind of repeats itself. There's always like this clash between like the new ideas of the younger generation and the older, like cynical, you know, I worked hard and they're not. Like like this. When is Joe? What year? It's like 70.
Fuck, I had notes, but then I was like, I'm just gonna work off the book.
Well, I'm gonna look it up. You can talk about Joe, and it's just like
there's nothing new under the sun, dude.
1970 it is.
Yeah,
so.
it just nothing changes. Nothing changes.
No, especially because it's like
everyone's afraid to change. Yeah. I think we're in a fucking this loop of samsara. We're never gonna get out of it, dude. I'm in Buddhist hell.
But yeah, I had always just seen that poster of him with a shotgun and be like, this movie looks good.
And he's got like that little smirk.
Yeah, the little hat he wears. So yeah, I'd seen it for the first. It was on Tubi. It was on one of those streaming services that doesn't get the best quality prints. I've since picked it up on DVD. It's kind of out of print. You can't really get it, which. Big surprise. It's not a movie that has mainstream appeal today, I don't think. Maybe someone like Kino would do it, but I really enjoyed Joe. Did you enjoy it?
Joe's great, yeah. He says it right here. He's like, today it might be controversial to even refer to Joe as a black comedy, but it sure wasn't when it was first released. It's funny.
It is funny.
And like, I've talked about this before, how I find ethnic humor funny and racism funny, believe it or not. Like, I know it might sound weird, but like, there's this scene where, well, basically, do you want to kind of go through the plot a little bit?
Yeah, let's go through.
Go ahead.
So it's about basically Dennis Patrick plays Bill, and he's kind of your businessman living in New York. He's got a daughter played by Susan Sarandon, Melissa, who's kind of...
First movie?
Yeah.
18?
She's pretty hot in this movie, too.
Va-va-va-voom.
Yeah. I've always liked her. I know people like kind of...
What's wrong with Susan Sarandon?
It's what's that movie with?
I just like her as an actress.
The Witches of Eastwick. She's like steals the show, I feel like. She's got like that nerdy glasses look in that. I've always liked her. But yeah, she's
creature of the night.
She's living in this shithole, disgusting looking apartment, not a set. It's got to be. Yeah.
Well, he says it. I got it right here. Frankly, it was the squalor of the apartment the two junkies at the beginning lived in that creeped me out the most. And as a kid, like I read that and I was like, fuck. Yeah. When I was young, that shit really. Because I had a pretty bucolic childhood, lower middle class, but they kept the house clean. You know what I mean? And like I have squalor, living in that is just, I can't imagine it.
I haven't seen this movie since I read the book the first time around, which is a few months ago. But isn't it like the bathtub is like in the living room too?
There.
It's like it's so gross.
And they're reusing wood. It's just it's scummy. And that character, I don't know his name, the guy who plays the junkie boyfriend. He's just he's such a slimy piece
he really is. But yeah, so Bill Compton, he goes looking for his daughter Melissa and finds the boyfriend at the apartment and ends up getting into a confrontation with him, ends up killing him, and ends up at a bar.
Yeah, he just flees.
Yeah, and that's where we meet Peter Boyle's Joe, who's kind of this blue collar.
He's mid rant, I think, when the Dennis Patrick
full
character
racist
walks in.
Kind of rant there.
Unfortunately, I will not be reciting anything from there because we'd like to keep the show
for sure
uncanceled for the moment. But it's funny. It's funny to hear someone unchained, like that id almost.
Well, it's funny, like the bartender's reaction, everyone around his reaction. They're just like,
you know, they've heard,
just shut up.
They've heard it a million
this
fucking
drunken
times.
Rambling of this guy. It's not just like he's not just ranting about it's that thing of like my job, welfare, like that's what I'm saying. You have never, I guess, because in reality we see this repeat because this generation of Joe, like they said this to their kids. It was like you kind of grew up hearing this stuff.
Yep.
And it just gets to a point where it repeats itself. But yeah, they end up kind of hitting it off. I guess Bill finds solace in the fact that here's this man that he's kind of intrigued by him.
Well, Joe's ranting like, "I'd like to kill them all. I want to kill them all." And then, like in like a weird drunken moment, I think I forget his name, the Dennis Patrick character, just kind of goes, "Bill, thank you," just kind of goes, "I killed one." And then Joe's like, "Huh?"
Yeah.
But I think that's where it starts. He's like, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?"
Yeah, they start to form a friendship based on that, and he's still looking for his daughter, right? Because she's
kind of out there somewhere.
Yeah. And so the two of them, like the best is when like they get their wives together at that dinner party scene.
That's the most
it's so uncomfortable,
scene.
and it's just.
But it's funny with that whole scene with Joe in the bar, as Tarantino says, he's like, the audience is dying laughing.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, they really were. And he's like, as soon as he gets a look at all the, I assume, soul music on the jukebox's playlist, he yells out, "Christ, they even fucked up the goddamn music."
Yeah.
The audience of the Tiffany Theater burst out laughing even harder than before. It's a funny performance. It's just, you can tell he's not holding back.
Yeah.
He's doing it
well,
full
apparently
bore.
he even, he was, he didn't like his performance, or I think he was upset by how the movie ended up portraying him and what it did.
It's one of those things where you find this a lot, where the enemy, it's a tough thing where you make the bad guy too interesting.
Yeah.
This happens with Nazis all the time in movies. It's like it's interesting. So you find yourself weirdly not sympathetic, but more interested in the bad guy than the good guy.
Yeah.
Because what's the good guy going to do? He's going to kill the bad guy.
Yeah.
What's the bad guy going to do? He's going to try to fuck with the
They
good
have the motivation.
It's
and they
so much more interesting. And Joe's, I mean, he almost blows the Bill character. The Bill character's boring. He's a stiff. It's interesting to watch him kind of get sucked into Joe's world, and that's what happened. Like, they kind of start hanging out. And like you said, he goes like, "You got to come over. You got to meet the wife. We'll cook you dinner, blah, blah, blah." And like you said, Bill lives in a Manhattan high-rise. I don't know where the fuck Joe lives. One of the outer boroughs somewhere, Staten Island or something. It's the most uncomfortable scene when they're all having dinner together. It's very funny. But he's just like, he's oddly aggressive and like, "What do you mean?" Like to the other wife, like all
it's weird too because this movie is directed by Avildsen, who
I hate.
Yeah,
only because of his name.
It's
Avildsen. It's such an annoying name.
But he was really known for doing those like really inspirational kind of Karate Kid and Rocky, and this is like a really interesting movie for him because it just feels so kind of dark. And he also directed a movie we get requested for a lot, which I'm sure we'll revisit. Neighbors, the Dan Aykroyd Belushi comedy.
Sure.
But yeah, I love the scene when they're out at like that bar in Manhattan, and it's like the hippies are looking at them and they're like, "What do those guys want? They gotta want something. They don't belong here."
Yeah.
And they just end up at this apartment with them, and they ended up like banging two of the hippie girls,
getting high,
and then they both like profess their love for the women, and like they want to leave their wives for them. It's so ridiculous. It's so like funny.
Yeah, it's a movie where I mean, obviously you're not seeing anything like this today.
Mm-mm.
Nothing, not even close. And it's got that brutal ending where they eventually track them down at like some little hideout in the mountains or something up by Woodstock, who knows, like upstate New York or something, some shitty flop house. And they're going in there to still find the daughter, and it ends with the Bill character because Joe's like they both go in with rifles.
Yeah.
And Joe just kind of starts blasting them at a certain point. One of them moves too quick or something.
They get their wallet stolen, so they end up at this house to get their wallet back, and he goes in like just ready for guns ablazing, like, "I want my wallet back." And one of them tries to escape. It escalates really quickly, and then all of a sudden he's just firing at everything that moves. By the way, the tagline on the poster is "Keep America Beautiful."
Keep America Beautiful. Okay,
America
very
Beautiful.
good, very good.
With he's holding a
Joe, lovely picture, great ending, inspiring,
manly man.
Yeah,
he's holding up a target with just a hippie's face on it. He's going to come up too a lot. He's in a couple. No, he's only in one more of these movies, but he played a great piece of shit, Peter Boyle.
Oh yeah,
because he's great in Hardcore. Friends of Eddie Coyle, he plays a similar kind of just shit guy. Mm-hmm. And I feel like most of he's remembered for now is Everybody Loves Raymond as just like the lovable grandfather, but he was a great like piece of shit in some of these movies.
Oh yeah. Well, he's got the look too.
Yeah.
That head. Perfect.
Local guy, Philadelphian.
Yeah, he was, right. I forgot about that.
And also, there's a movie mentioned here that I wanted to bring up. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Where's Papa?
No, I haven't.
It's such a ridiculous movie.
Is it?
Yeah. It's basically George Segal lives with his mother, and he just can't rid himself of her. She's kind of goofy. It's a weird movie. He kind of I think he says he remembers seeing it, but he never went back and saw it because he talks about just how much classism and race played a part in these movies. There always had to be a group of young punks who were all riding the subway or mugging, or it's weird how, and he talks a little bit about this in Dirty Harry, just how much of that, there was kind of fear in the older generations about the younger people. And these movies really targeted that because it comes up in all of them, especially Taxi Driver and Hardcore. That's
for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, what I love, I guess Quentin Tarantino didn't even see the end of Joe. He had to ask his parents on the way home what happened in the end. So
he fell asleep. It was a double bill, I think. Another one. It was Where's Papa?
Where's Papa?
Yeah, right. It's funny too with all the fucked up movies he saw. He says, and I think this is pretty common for people his age. The one movie he goes, was there any movie back then I couldn't handle? Yes, Bambi. And he says, I remember my little brain screaming the 5-year-old version of what the fuck's happening. When Bambi's mom gets it. Is that what happened? I haven't seen Bambi in a long time. 30 years.
Same thing like Old Yeller. I don't like those sappy, sad Disney movies.
Yeah. Well, Bambi after that's
I know, but even so, you could see the live action remake when that inevitably comes out.
Just like Thumper. Thumper was a good
Thumper
character.
The Rabbit. Yeah. Do you want to move on? Any movies you discovered through this first chapter that you wanted to...
Yeah, a couple of things in here. He said him and his parents went and saw a double feature of Melvin Van Peebles' Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song and Robert Altman's Brewster McCloud. And this always cracks me up. He says, Brewster McCloud is one of the worst movies to ever carry a studio logo. And that's fully acknowledging Altman also made Quintet for a studio as well. Quintet is just terrible, boring, and pointless. But Brewster McCloud is the cinematic equivalent of a bird shitting on your head. I like Brewster McCloud.
I was gonna say, didn't you touch on this with our Popeye episode, our second episode?
It was the kind of it was weird. It's weird. It's an odd.
He's learning
film.
to fly, right?
Yeah, I liked it. It's funny that he didn't. I've heard Quintet is fucking terrible. Though.
Really?
It's been on my list to watch, and I'm like, everyone says it sucks. It's just nothing. It's like a nothingness movie.
It's funny. I sent you that clip of John Carpenter. Someone brings up Robert Altman, the interviewer, and the look on his face, it's complete disdain.
Dude, it's the eyes go up, and he's just like...
It's like someone just stepped in, or he smelled dog shit. That's what he looks like.
But it's just so funny that he shits on Brewster McCloud. Like, I've said this before, like, Sweetback, it's almost unwatchable.
Yeah.
You can't... I mean, like, you literally cannot see.
Has that come up before, or was there something else called Badass or something?
Well, it was the movie his son made about the making of...
Gotcha, okay.
It's phenomenal.
Why did we talk about that?
I forget. It was one of our first episodes.
Okay.
It might have had something to do with exploitation.
Does it have to do with Cool World? Was there some tie in there?
Might have been.
Okay.
But but I will say this. Sweetback does have the best tagline ever. Rated X by an all-white jury. I mean, that's pretty damn good. That's pretty fucking good.
He touches on that too, how X is no longer a thing and how it used to be, which is interesting. There's a few points he makes in this book of the difference between the dead end kids and the East Side kids, like just little asides he goes on where, like you said, his filmmaker brain is like...
Oh yeah, and another thing is about this book, I think he's very subtly showing, because he gets criticism all the time of he's just ripping shit off. And I don't think that's totally fair. I can understand why people make that criticism, but there's little tidbits here and there in this book where you're like, oh, that's where you got that from. Because I think he went and saw, let me see here, I think it's Black Gun with Jim Brown. And he says, and when the movie ended with a freeze frame of Jim Brown as Gunn, the guy behind Reggie and me proclaimed out loud, now that's a movie about a bad motherfucker. And you can tell that's where he got the wallet.
Yeah.
But the Pulp Fiction wallet. You know what I mean? It's like little shit like that in the book. He places them here and there. Like I told you, I was watching Charlie Varick. There's that one scene where the John Vernon character's like talking to the bank manager. And he's like, look, these guys are going to come after you and it ain't going to be good. He's like, they're going to come with a pair of pliers and a blowtorch. And I'm like, dude, that's Pulp Fiction. Like you can see where he got these little tidbits. And to me, I'm like, is that ripping off? I don't know. It's just a line of dialogue.
Yeah, there's a difference between just paying homage and tribute and versus like stealing, which I think in
everyone
cinematic,
steals. You have to steal.
Yeah, you take shit you've seen before.
But that's kind of cinema. You're building on everything that can't. We've talked about this, I think, last time. How like you look at the decades after 1898, They're all different.
Yeah.
Film is changing constantly. It is now. And, I may not be happy with how it's changing, but it's changing.
It's changing.
And hopefully it changes into something fucking halfway watchable that isn't... whatever. Well, Bullitt!
Next chapter takes
1968.
on Bullitt, which... Had you seen Bullitt?
I had never seen Bullitt.
Interesting.
And you know what it was? It was always a... I don't really like Steve McQueen.
Wow.
I don't hate him.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not like, ugh. He doesn't interest me. I think he's a boring guy. It comes through fairly well when he's playing steely-eyed character. Like, he's good in Bullitt. It really works, but I have it written somewhere. He just looks constipated a lot.
Just look grumpy and...
Yeah, he just has that, like, grumpy, like, I'm like, but not to say, like, I don't, trust me, there's not, like, a huge criticism of him. I just never was the biggest fan. Plus, it always seemed like he was like, a lot of car movies. I don't give a shit about cars. I never have. Grand Prix is good, though. You ever see that?
No.
It's fucking awesome.
I always like The Great Escape. He's got a lot of good... Never seen it?
Never seen it.
Wow.
I was about to watch it recently, and I'm like,
He's got some good motorcycle.
It's really long.
It is long.
And I'm like...
But it's good.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. It's got that theme song's phenomenal.
I had seen Bullitt years ago, and it never grabbed me, and I didn't revisit it the first time I read this book. I had since I knew we were going to be doing this episode, so I watched it a few nights ago, and I enjoyed it a lot more because after reading this book, he even brings up the plot makes no sense.
Nothing.
It is not a good plot. It's just
a mood movie.
Yeah.
Like vibes.
Yeah, and like soundtrack and San Francisco. And
on that note, the soundtrack, here's a little thing I have highlighted here. If they had a sense of the movie, they also might remember Lalo Schifrin's terrific jazzy score, the type of score Quincy Jones tried to do for years and always failed miserably at. He talks a lot of shit in this book.
He does.
There's some obscure people, we'll get to it too, where I'm like, who is this guy? He does not like. But I have to say, he singled that out. Lalo Schifrin's fucking awesome, dude. His music's always... I always think of his music. It always pops into my head. I love it. And I love the opening of this movie. It's very expressionist.
Yeah.
Almost. Like how all those weird henchmen heads are just kind of looking and the credits are like moving in and out. It's a great opening. But yeah, the plot, you're not really watching this movie for the plot.
No, I even I had to take a pause from it and just read the synopsis on Wikipedia because I was still confused even watching it. I'm like, wait. Who's and what's because it is it again, you're building up to just different action set pieces and it's kind of like a detective story. I feel like everyone knows this movie for the car chase. That's kind of what it's remembered for. And it's a great car chase.
It's astounding.
And I told you this after I saw it. It's just so quiet. There's no shouting of the people. It's just the noise of the cars. There's no music. The tires on the road. That's all it is.
It's really good.
And you cut
super effective.
A lot of cuts back and forth from the perspective of the cars out the windshield. And the only real difference is the sound of the cars. So whatever, I forget what car Steve McQueen's character is driving, Bullitt, but it sounds a lot louder. It's just a great... And there's a few times where it's it's not a set, it's an actual city, and they're whipping around those corners and flying down the hills.
Well,
it is
he gets
impressive.
into it. I mean, well, real quick, I'll say that I like these little asides. The comedian Robert Wool once told me, I've seen Bullitt 4 times, and I couldn't tell you what the plot's about. All I know is it has something to do with Robert Vaughn. Which Robert Vaughn's really good in this, too. And it's funny how the DA has always been a shit character in movies. Mm-hmm. And in real life.
Yeah.
DA's
it's the go-to dickhead, corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a quote I have that I saved. It's, Bullitt is about action, atmosphere, San Francisco, Yates' great location photography, the jazzy score, and Steve McQueen, his haircut and wardrobe. Nothing else matters.
I have
nothing else matters?
Yeah, and it's true. Sometimes that's enough. Mm-hmm. And here it's more than enough. It's really, really great. And right here, I got another quote. There's going to be a lot of this. Don Siegel did terrific location photography in his career, and he would do a good job shooting San Francisco 3 years later in Dirty Harry, even though half the movie would be shot on the Universal backlot. But nobody had ever shot San Francisco as great as Peter Yates did or ever will again. And they won't, because that's gone. Mm-hmm. That San Fran is gone, dude. It couldn't be more gone. He also says the Friends of Eddie Coyle, overrated.
Oh, wow.
I kind of agree.
The film and the book? Or
no, the book is really good.
I've read the book.
The movie's good. It's almost like, I don't want to say too dour.
It's not a very optimistic story.
No,
to begin with.
It's not. But
what's it called? Eddie Fingers.
Is that what they called him? Because they busted his fingers up.
He's got.
Recommend the movie.
Yeah,
I'm not. Yeah, but I kind of agree with this. It is a little overrated. But
is that a Peter Yates movie as well?
Friends of Eddie Coyle was Peter Yates.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, it's so nice seeing like this and Dirty Harry. San Fran looks like, man, it looks so fucking cool. It looks so
Have you ever
awesome. No,
I've been once, and there's still a lot of cool.
I believe it.
But yeah, another one. It's based on a pulpy novel called Mute Witness. You know, there's a few of these books. Like when we talk about the Getaway, I want to talk about Jim Thompson a little bit. But
yeah.
A lot of these books, they seem to be like a similar type of like. I love, you know me. I love these pulpy like detective stories, and I would like to read more of the guy who wrote this, which is Robert Fish.
You know, I just said like I'm not the hugest Steve McQueen fan, but honestly, reading this book made me more of a Steve McQueen fan because he talks about how like what kind of guy he was, and he was a real selfish, self-centered dickhead.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's awesome. Like I kind of miss that with Hollywood people. Like be a cocksucker.
You want to hear one of my favorite Steve McQueen stories?
Yes, please.
So Steve McQueen used to frequent a notorious Hollywood bar, which I love, called Musso and Frank's.
Oh yeah, sure.
And
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
It is
It's the funniest line in the movie.
Another frequent guest of Musso and Frank's, who was more beloved by the bartenders there, was Bukowski. And there was one night where McQueen was drinking a bit and started to pick a fight with Bukowski, and like. Maybe don't pick a fight with the guy that just looks like he's been through some
chewed up,
yeah,
and spit out a million times.
And apparently, like they had asked Steve McQueen to leave because they were like, not only would like Bukowski, he would just take it. You know, he wouldn't. That was the thing about him. He would just get into fights and brawls, and
sure.
I think McQueen was just talking shit. Like, so I love the fact that they almost came to blows in Musso and Frank's.
Can you imagine watching that? It'd be so funny. Yeah, Steve McQueen seemed like a real asshole. And like, here's a little quote about Bullitt itself. The part is nothing, and yet he makes it a great role. He practically does nothing, but nobody in the history of movies did nothing like Steve McQueen. And then a little further down it says he would just be. And I'm like, I kind of got a point there.
He's surprisingly quiet. I said that to you. Like, he doesn't talk much.
Doesn't need to.
Yeah.
He makes another point here where he's like, you know, he's getting chewed out by the DA or whatever. And, you know, any other character at the end would have some snappy remark or something. He just walks away. He doesn't even, like the guy wasn't even there.
There's a movie of his I really like called The Hunter. And there's a scene in that where he just smashes into this guy's car and doesn't say where the two of them are just looking at each other out the window. He is just nailing this guy's car, backing up, hits it again. Like, he did a very... We're going to talk a little bit about Burt Reynolds in a little bit, but they're two, you know, self-proclaimed cool guys that had different styles. And I think McQueen's style was more brooding, quiet, you know, not talking.
Little tidbit here. Eastwood tried to give a McQueen-like performance in Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, and he didn't pull it off. But McQueen would never do Thunderbolt and Lightfoot because he was honestly and refreshingly selfish. Why spend 4 months shooting a film just to get Jeff Bridges an Oscar nomination? It's a good point.
I'm not a fan of that movie, but
Oh yeah, I remember you saying that you didn't really like it.
I like George Kennedy in it, who's good in everything.
Like George Kennedy, yeah. Tell you what, I love the two hitmen that he's chasing, Bill Hickman and John Aprea. And John Aprea is like kind of the more. He's like a little. He even says it here. He's like Aprea with his thinning white hair and his long tan trench coat. Has a surprisingly soft and appealing voice when he's in the hospital inquiring to the staff about where Johnny Ross is. And he does. He's like, I'm here to see my friend. He's a stone killer, too. Like, it's really good. Those two are really, really good together.
I do like in this movie that the police captain is kind of on his side. I do like when the police captain's not totally like, you're off the case. And give me, you know, it's kind of refreshing that this guy, they trust Bullitt.
Yeah, they do.
And again, like you said, the DA is kind of the villain. The overall villain of the story is the
it's
district
funny
attorney.
Too, because the way the movie is, you're so primed to be like, oh, he's up to something. There's something nefarious here, and there really wasn't. He just wanted to get that guy on the witness stand. Like that was it. Like,
and Robert Vaughn is just so perfect in that role.
He's great. He's excellent. Here's a little thing though. What you were saying when he was, how quiet he was. Bullitt doesn't explain to the audience or other characters what he's doing or thinking. He just does them, and we watch. When I mentioned this to Neil McQueen, how little Bullitt smoked, that was his wife at the time, she said that was all Steve. He really didn't like to talk too much in movies. He would just rip out pages of dialogue. He'd do scenes with Don Gordon and say, give those lines to Don. Then Don would say, who cares who says it? The camera's still going to be on you. And Steve smiled and said, that's right, baby. Steve McQueen's kind of awesome. Yeah. I actually kind of love Steve McQueen.
All right, so the next chapter is Dirty Harry, 1971. Had you seen Dirty Harry?
Bits and pieces. Never sat through the whole thing.
So I feel like we've talked about this before. Movies that you think you've seen because you just know everything about it. But
yeah, do you feel lucky, punk? You're like, okay, I get it, but no,
it's not even the quote.
I know. Isn't that funny?
That's amazing. I love those where it's like it's almost there, but somewhere it gets diluted into being something else. And
what's great too, John Milius wrote that whole thing. He was such a good script polisher.
He was, yeah.
He wrote all that great inner monologuing from Captain Willard in Apocalypse Now.
Oh, really? It was him?
Vietnam.
Yeah.
Bullshit piles up so high, so fast, you need wings to stay above it. Like, Milius wrote all that stuff. Like, that's so good, man.
What did you think of Dirty Harry?
I loved it.
Yeah, it's great.
Absolutely loved it.
It's another one where it's just like, it's a world that no longer exists. And it's just got great action set pieces and just great characters.
San Fran looks awesome in it. The characters are great.
Clint's had his all-time best in this one.
I was really interested to see this because the minor amount of film work I've done, this is how I always approached it. And it was really nice to see like a fucking master like Siegel say this. He was being interviewed by Curtis Hanson, the filmmaker, in the 1968 issue of Film Magazine Cinema. And he says, I'm extremely conscious of editing when I'm shooting because I work with limited time, very short schedules. I plan everything as I think it's going to be cut. Then he added, it doesn't necessarily follow that because you're a good editor, you'll be a good director. But I do think that to be a good director, you have to be a good editor. And every time I've done it, I know exactly
of course you have
how
to.
I'm going to cut it.
Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're going to be missing stuff. And
so I like the idea of coverage.
Start assembling it in your head.
You have to, man. You have to know what you're going to do. And it's like... it's so nice to see that because anything I see anymore, I'm like, these people are not thinking it all the way through. You could just tell these movies it's the idea of coverage. And, I love slamming Apatow, but it's like, oh, let's shoot whatever and we'll cut it together. It's like, no, man, you have no vision.
It doesn't always pan out. It worked very early for them in those early comedy movies, but now it's at a point where it's like, you need more substance than that.
Right.
I do love though that I didn't highlight it because maybe you have it somewhere. He does talk about how we went from being like, cowboys were the hero and like the John Wayne, John Ford movies, and we start to see like these cop characters. This is where that shift starts to happen. They become the next big thing. Like kids went from playing, cowboys and Indians to cops and robbers.
Right.
Like having a Magnum is now the new.
And it's funny too because I doubt Eastwood had too much of an issue with it, but Steve McQueen playing Bullitt, he was just like. He was real flirtatious with the whole fucking flower power movement. He just wanted to get laid.
Yeah.
But he was like, I can't play a cop. He's like, these kids they don't want to see me as a cop. I'm Steve McQueen. Cops are pigs. Like, but it worked.
Yeah, it works. And there's a lot in Dirty Harry. It's a lot about the, him pushing back against the police authority, which we just talked about. That's refreshing. I like that in Bullitt. But in Dirty Harry, I feel like it kind of laid the groundwork for that trope of like the police captain that's, your methods are too out there, Harry. Yeah. Like I like this. It works because it kind of helped invent that.
Oh yeah.
But it. I don't know if you've seen any of the sequels for this movie, but it keeps coming back. Like there's the Enforcer, which is the I think third one. There's a point where they give us your badge, and he goes, "Here, take your 7-point suppository," and the police captain goes, "What did you say?" And he goes, "Stick it in your ass." It's worth it just for that exchange alone.
Dude, Clint's funny.
He's great.
A lot of his deliveries are very comical. Not before we get to... did you read this part here? The alternative reading of Body Snatchers Tarantino has?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. I wanted to touch on this real quick. He goes, obviously the pod people are murdering the earthlings they duplicate and replace. However, if you're more of the mind that is your intellect and your consciousness that make you who you are, then the pod people transformation is closer than a rebirth than a murder. And it's very interesting.
That's an interesting take on it.
Yeah, like, for instance, with all the havoc that Donald Sutherland causes in the Kaufman version, including the murder of various pod people, there never is a thought of punishment or vengeance on the pod people's part, even though he's obviously proven himself to be a threat. They just want him to become one of them.
And by the way, what do you call this, a footnote?
Yeah.
We need to point out that there's a few footnotes that take up the entire page.
Yeah.
It's kind of great.
Yeah, it is. But, so I have this highlighted. And this is what was happening at the time where this movie's coming out. Society is screaming police brutality. The public is siding with the crooks. And the gutless police brass, local government, and the courts are cowed into compliance with an increasingly permissive social order that favors lawbreakers over law enforcement. Sound familiar? I'm like, yep. My God, I read that and I'm like, holy shit, dude. I'm like, what was this, 71?
Yeah.
Fuck it, nothing changes.
Well, he also says here, most cops in 70s action movies were busy busting dope rings or mafia Mr. Biggs. Mm-hmm. But from the 80s to today, cops after serial killers is the main occupation of the movie police. So we start to see a little bit of both of that because he's going after the gangs, but obviously the Scorpio killer is the main and he even says it, casting on that, perfect.
Oh, Andy Robinson?
Yeah. I mean,
was he in Charlie Varick? Was that him? He's like the
so.
little young nut.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was him. Yeah, and he never lives down Scorpio.
Yeah, because Siegel recasts a lot of guys. He tends to come back to that pool, and there's just again, I think the Dirty Harry. You have to, if you're ever just looking to be kind of stunned by a movie, watch the Deadpool, the last Dirty Harry movie with a young Jim Carrey in it.
Really?
It's out. He's like a celebrity stature at this point.
Oh, no.
Clinty's Dirty Harry. It's just like.
I remember liking Magnum Force, but the criticism against it is like, okay, Harry was kind of a vigilante, and now he doesn't like vigilantes. Like, I kind of get it. It's kind of stupid. It kind of goes back against what Harry was trying to, accomplish.
The idea of like having a secret death squad though is kind of fun. That's in that movie where like all the rogue cops. Again, there's like sudden impact. That's one that everyone's like, I kind of remember that. Like, what's that? Like, he just kind of gets diluted. He did so many of these movies too. There's Tightrope and The Gauntlet, where he plays very similar characters, Eastwood, and it's just like, I feel like that's what happened. They would just stumble upon a script and be like, I'd make a good Dirty Harry sequel. Let's just. Then he starts to put Sandra Locke in all of them, his then girlfriend or wife, I forget who, but I've raved about Clint before. I love Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, he's fantastic. One thing with this movie, and you can tell Tarantino talks about the response at the time from critics. I wish people had more of a sense of history, or at least they weren't so like Ebert knows better. Like, Ebert claimed the film had a fascist moral position. He attributed it to times and not moral He attributed it to the times and not moral bankruptcy on the filmmaker's part. Pauline Kael was calling it fascist, whatever. Yeah. What the fuck is fascist about this movie? Oh, should we do kid gloves with Scorpio? Like, no, man. A killer needs to be killed. That's not fascism.
Yeah.
And then he goes, the point of the film's detractors was crystal clear. It was Dirty Harry's embrace of a fascist ideology, not its quality, that was in question. But this so-called fascist element to the film was overstated by the critics of the daily newspapers and weekly magazines. He says, frankly, it's the critics' response to it in its day that strikes one as reactionary. Does anything in the movie that Harry does depict outright fascism? No. And then he goes into like the black bank robbers. It's like, they were running from a bank they just robbed.
Yeah.
Well, because they're black, we let them. Oh, sorry. No, you shoot bank robbers. I don't care who it is.
Well, again, he even talks about it. It was just like there was a fear of, older white people at this time who were really, uncomfortable or just and there was a lot that I don't think they understood about younger generations, and whenever you don't understand something, it's kind of fear. So I think that's why Dirty Harry was championed, because here was this guy who didn't really ask questions. I mean, that the opening, like you're saying, with the bank and the I gots to know, like it's a great scene. It really sets up the character. He's eating a hot dog, like
and just he's so good at like being a cop. Like, he just immediately he's like, what's that car doing over there? Like, he could just tell something's not right.
There's a, I think he says, one of the most memorable taglines for a modern movie at that time was one that sold Dennis Hopper's Easy Rider. A man went looking for America and he couldn't find it anymore. So it's that idea, like this silent majority, that really starts to be the, kind of the template for a lot of these movies. And he coins it later, because we're going to talk about something, but like revenge-o-matics. That's what a lot of these movies are, and I never knew that was a thing, but I've always loved those type of movies.
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah,
they're fun.
And well, again, we're going to talk about, but it becomes a lot about like using sex as a weapon. Like, that becomes the focus of a lot of these movies, and revenge against like sex. Like, it's really interesting how all these movies at this time were dealing with that. They
had I guess it was just the right time and place. Like I said, because people were open to new things, seeing new things, trying new things. I swear to God, I feel like I live in I don't even know, like some kind of hermetically sealed bubble anymore. Everyone's so cowardly.
Well, here's a quote he writes. What Richard Nixon called the silent majority were frightened. Frightened of America they no longer recognized, in society they couldn't understand. Joe represents that perfectly, and Dirty Harry also has a lot of that, but Dirty Harry's more optimistic and, more of a hero, and the ending is a little bit more, what you'd expect in this type of movie. Not everyone getting blown away and killed.
Yeah, right.
Have you ever seen Death Wish?
Oh, yeah.
What do you think of that?
It's been a long time. It's great. I love it. Yeah, it's fun.
Like, all these movies are kind of like Charles Bronson. He did so many of these type of movies.
There's one thing, I guess I missed it in here, but he was talking about, there's that scene where Scorpio is he's got his sniper rifle and he's like going around, and there's the gay guy.
Yeah.
He circles on that. One thing I found kind of funny was in the Mad Magazine spoof of Dirty Harry, Tarantino says, Harry walks up and arrests the gay guy. He doesn't arrest Scorpio. I'm like, that's pretty funny.
Do you want to touch on Charlie Varick at all?
Kind of if you want.
You had never seen that?
I'd never seen it.
I love that movie.
It's good. Did Walter Matthau know how to fly planes?
I don't know.
Because that and what's the other one?
Walter Matthau being like a sex symbol. Like,
yeah, that is funny.
Is he
call me Buttermaker. After I watched Bad News Bears, I was really working on his voice. Buttermaker. Yeah, go out and play for Buttermaker. I'll work on it. But in that and Hopscotch, he has scenes where he's like, it's like a plane.
Really?
You don't remember? It's probably been a while.
I haven't seen Hopscotch in a long time, but Charlie Varick, I know the whole ending is him in the plane.
Yeah, I meant to look it up. He must have been some kind of pilot.
Charlie Varick is a great. We've talked about heist movies where they get away with it, and that's
he gets away with it.
But it's also one of the that ending where he ends up like seducing that woman in the hotel. It's just like it comes out of nowhere. It's very strange.
Out of nowhere, yeah.
But Joe Don Baker, who is also
he was
phenomenal.
Excellent in that movie. He's really good as the guy hired to go find Charlie and kill him
because it's mob money, right? He robs a bank.
They inadvertently knock off a mob bank.
Yeah.
Which is, and it's cold blooded too. Like his female accomplice is waiting out in the car. She puts a bullet right in a cop's eye. Like he's like, "What are you doing?" Like
it's a side of Matthau you kind of forget existed. But there's a lot of these early.
He's brutal in that movie. Cold. But yeah, Charlie Varick's cool. Definitely recommend. Pauline Kael. I mean, I should read her one of these days. I'm sure she's a good writer. I always hear that. Sometimes I just can't get into reading some of this shit. But he says, she refers to the film's antagonist, Scorpio, by a plethora of sarcastic boogeyman names. Hippie Maniac, the many-sided evil one, Super Evil Dragon. Her point was, in order for the audiences to be on Harry's side, the filmmakers needed to contrive a boogeyman of such evil dimensions that anything Harry does seem justified. Okay. He was justified. It's a fucking serial killer. I don't understand this. Like, I just don't get it.
He takes a bus full of kids at the end.
Which is a great, when he hits the kid on the bus. Oh, that's good. That is good.
Dude, it's particularly in the Getaway. There's a few moments in these movies where either like women or children just get backhanded, and it's like, it's jarring in comparison to what we're used to today.
Yeah.
There's a lot of just like gritty violence.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of gritty violence, do you want to move on to the next
one?
Is Deliverance from 1972. Had you seen Deliverance?
No.
Much like Mr. Tarantino, I saw this movie as a kid.
Oh my god, that's excellent. He saw it in a double feature with The Wild Bunch and Deliverance, which was a pretty good double feature.
Yeah, I'm assuming The Wild Bunch was first because at least that ending might have prepared him for Deliverance a little bit.
Yeah,
but I remember catching this movie, and he likens the squeal like a pig scene the same thing. He didn't understand what was happening, but you understand that it's something humiliating.
Yeah,
you don't. As a kid, I didn't know that was a thing that another man could do to another man.
You wouldn't even think about
it. There's something humiliating about, and the way Ned Beatty depicts it, the way it's...
And he's soft
and the way
doughy.
No one talks about it afterwards. To this day, now I've obviously seen it as an adult, it is really uncomfortable.
It is.
Everything that you believe as a man in that scene is brought into question.
It's brutal.
It just makes you like...
And he said, he's like, if you didn't read the book, I believe it's James Dickey.
I think you're right, yeah.
Most audiences who saw the movie in 1972 were completely unprepared for the dramatic turn of events. It's why they were so effective. You're not seeing that coming. You assume maybe it's going to be a tough ride down the river. For those of you who don't know, four guys go on like a little canoe trip because that valley was getting flooded.
Right.
And it was the last time you were going to be able to kind of go through there. It was going to be under miles of water. So,
they're going to park the cars down, and so they have a ride to get back, and then they're going to use canoes to go down the river. And here's a quote from Tarantino in this book. "The rape of Bobby isn't presented like the unfathomable depravity of Andy Robinson's Scorpio and Dirty Harry. There's a childishness to McKinney's torment of Beatty. It's why the scene seems so real and doesn't play like a calculated narrative turn."
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, and he also makes the comment, like, what Jaws did, what this movie did for camping. And I could see that. You don't want this to happen to you. Because you're in the middle of nowhere.
I know that. I assume the people cast in this movie were just like locals that like
not that McKinney guy.
Well, he's the one that you probably need to hire as an actor.
And that's the other thing too. It's like as an actor, you're gonna rape Ned Beatty. Like, how do you I assume you just go, oh, I'm an actor.
Very early in his career, right? He hadn't been known for much at this point.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And it's like Tarantino makes the point. He's like him and the other guy especially. But like you'd think they were just they went to the backwoods and like, hey, you guys want to be in a movie? They're actors. Like they really play. They sell it very well.
I know the Banjo Kid still does the occasional convention appearance.
Does he really?
Yeah.
Oh wow, I would have assumed he was dead.
Banjo Man now.
But yeah. So to what you were saying, since I had no idea what sodomy was, I had no idea Bill McKinney was shoving his dick up Ned Beatty's asshole.
I didn't either.
I just love that sentence. Shoving his dick up Ned Beatty's asshole. God bless Ned Beatty. You'd think he'd never live that down. You'd think like he went on and just kept acting.
Yeah, but it's a film. I understand. It's a
film, but I mean, talk about typecast. I mean, like that could really fuck your career up. It's ballsy. It's ballsy to do that in a film. To be like, I'll do it.
When I just watch this movie, I'm just like, oh, these fucking guys. Whenever they were in a room together after this, it was probably just so uncomfortable. Like the characters, not the actors.
Well,
like it's so like
he says it here, and I'm sure you noticed it in the movie. He says, frankly, Bobby, the Ned Beatty character, seems to get over it quicker than the audience does. He really kind of shrugs off his rape.
By a gross, smelly, disgusting backwoods.
Yeah, that penis wasn't clean.
No.
Like, oh, my God. Oh man.
I need to let me take a palate cleanser here because he does bring up Woody Allen in this chapter.
Okay.
He says, suddenly one week, United Artists did a citywide re-release of 3 Woody Allen movies: Bananas, Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex, and Sleeper. Have you seen any of these?
I've seen Bananas.
It's really, really good. I think Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex is...
I remember you saying it's very funny.
It's really funny. And Bert's in that. Burt Reynolds pops up in that. But you look at again, this book is so concentrated on... I mean, there's a few that are not more action, thriller, but the 70s and the late 60s was a films that, like, you have the same decade, some of these Woody Allen movies mixed with some of these, like, it's just, you can't top that ever. We're never going to see another decade of film like this.
Unlikely.
Yeah, but every genre hit it so perfectly. Between Star Wars and Jaws and Indiana Jones, I know that was like 80s, but even it was like everything was just...
And I think it was the nature of the business too. You had a lot more avenues to get things produced.
Yeah.
Like who do you go to produce a film now? You're dealing with like 3 incredibly enormous corporations essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I read a really long article, I think it was in Variety, about kind of, a lot of anonymous sources about like Amazon's production and how they go about it. And I'm like, it's never going to work. They're never going to get exactly what they want because there's no like vision, I guess.
Yeah. They don't really champion vision. They kind of want cookie cutter more.
Even that, like, they almost have too much cash in the sense of like, you need a little restriction.
Well, yeah, you need to take chances too.
And they won't.
Yeah.
They're trying, and I was reading, it was a lot of internal stuff where it's like, we're trying to get everyone.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you've failed already.
Yeah.
You've already failed. The better thing is to do is make something that has a vision. I gotta stop using that word. But something like...
It's a way to describe it, though.
Like, think of movies like a Tarantino movie, like Pulp Fiction. He didn't make that for everyone, but everyone kind of likes it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's that's what you do. Just make something interesting.
He talks about Straw Dogs here, Peck and Punch Straw Dogs. You ever seen that one?
No.
Just check that out as well.
I know, I will.
Again, we're going to keep coming back to this. It's like there's a inciting incident that involves rape or sex. We talked about this a little bit in our Spaghetti Western episode we did at a certain point where
the casualness of rape.
The casualness of that, and what it like, not only that, like how it incited such wrath in the male characters to...
As it should.
Yeah, and that's why it's like you have these characters like, Dustin Hoffman, and as Orson would have called him, an ethnic dwarf, but... By the way, we should say our next book episode will be at a certain point, but My Lunches with Orson, which
maybe
is just...
towards the end of the summer, because I want to go through it again. I'm going to watch every Orson Welles movie that he wrote and directed.
Yeah.
At least direct it, maybe. So My Lunches with Orson, pick it up. If you're hearing this, read it. You're going to love it.
But there's a really great... the whole book, he's trying to make this movie that never ended up happening, and he wants like an all-American lead in it. It's a political thriller, and Henry Jaglom, who he's having lunch with, suggests either Al Pacino or Dustin Hoffman, and Orson says no ethnic dwarves. It's just hilarious.
The erudite racism of Orson Welles is it's so funny. His whole tirade about the Irish, whatever.
Yeah.
We'll get into that when we get into the book.
But yeah, check out Straw Dogs, because that's another one that's...
Oh, I will. Dude, trust me. And here's another thing, too. I know this criticism, we get this a lot. It's like, how the fuck you guys do a movie show? You haven't seen this? You can't watch everything.
We've seen
dude.
a lot of movies.
I've seen a lot of movies. You can't. I just can't. I have a fucking job. It sucks, but I can't watch movies at all times. To jump back, James Dickey did write Deliverance. It was his first novel. He ended up. He'd only ended up writing 3. The third one, To the White Sea, is practically a one-character book. And I remember years ago always hearing about this mythical To the White Sea script that the Coen brothers wrote. I heard it's like the best script ever. It's the most amazing script ever. Here we go. Tarantino. There was a script in the 90s floating around written by David Webb Peoples and the Coen brothers, which was terrible. That's for the To the White Sea. So he's seen it. I haven't seen the script, but I don't know.
Crystal Skull, it's better than Last Crusade.
I would be interested in revisiting Crystal Skull. When me and you, because I already said this months ago, when Dial of Dog Shit comes out, we're gonna go see it, and we're coming after the movie. We're coming right to the microphones.
I'm gonna talk. We're gonna talk about this in our movie catch up a little bit, but I have made peace with a certain. I realized something when that new trailer for that movie came out, and we're gonna talk about it on the movie catch up.
Okay, I look forward to that.
But how do you talk about Deliverance without talking about Burt Reynolds?
So good.
I mean, just the coolest.
As Lewis.
The coolest, and also I love he's kind of at a point now in this movie where he's losing his hair. He's got that thing we always talk about. You grow your hair long and kind of move it over so it looks like you have hair. There's something about him that's just... And I realized that through watching Smokey and the Bandit and some of these other movies I had never seen. He's just so goddamn cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a cool dude.
And this one, he gets kind of injured, so there's not
Well, that's the thing, too. It's we can't go through this whole book,
no,
obviously, but that's why I really recommend reading it. There's some good, interesting insights. But the Lewis character he's presenting that I'm a real worldly, woodsy kind of guy. But Tarantino makes the comment. He's like, Lewis knows who Roman Polanski is. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? He's kind of faking it. And other characters comment on it, too.
Lewis knows who Roman Polanski is. Lewis has seen Jack Nicholson in 5 Easy Pieces. He knows how to order a Brandy Alexander and a Harvey Wallbanger and how they're supposed to taste.
Right. So it's like he's playing this weird dual, it's what are they used to call them weekend warriors. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm going to go out there and live salt of the earth and then go back to my fucking office job.
And I forget because I haven't seen this movie in a few months now. He doesn't know all of them, right? He's a friend of one of the other guys. The others don't know him.
He's a friend of Voight. The Ned Beatty character, I don't think they know each other. And the other one might be, they kind of know each other. Yeah.
But he's just kind of shows up. He's brash. He's,
But Tarantino makes the comment, however, once the debate scene is over, when they're all debating what to do with the hillbilly that they killed, the film peaks. And I kind of agree. I kind of agree.
The ending is kind of slow, and it's not really the explosive,
very anticlimactic
you would like it to be. Mm-hmm. But yeah, even Tarantino goes on about the homoerotic. I mean, excluding that scene, there is a lot of the men were out and camping with each other, and here we are at a beautiful lake. And
well, I don't necessarily disagree. I think Tarantino goes to that well a little too often, looking for that subtext. I don't know. Famously, there's that scene, and I think a movie no one ever watches called Sleep With Me, where he does that whole Top Gun thing. They're at a party and he's just talking to...
Right.
He's actually a funny character in that movie because he's just this loser at a party who's trying to talk to anyone. And he goes into the whole Top Gun is actually subtextually about gay love between two men. It's very funny, but it's not everywhere, Quentin. You don't have to constantly be looking for it.
And speaking of Burt Reynolds, Quentin says, the dude that sat on Johnny's couch, dressed in his head-to-toe leather outfits, drenched in self-love, cracking jokes about his bad movies, was recognizable as the speechifying sexy stud in the scuba vest. Mm-hmm. So he's saying a lot of who Burt Reynolds was comes through in his character Lewis in this movie.
It really does, yeah. And like you said, he gets sidelined. They go down some rapids, he breaks his leg, and then he's out of the movie.
He's out of the movie.
And here's Tarantino. While thematically it's rich and structurally it's daring to sideline Burt Reynolds' lure just before the third act, in this movie, cinematically, it's suicidal. And it does kind of... you're taking Burt out of the movie, and he's out.
Yeah.
It basically goes to sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not the...
When Voight's climbing the mountain to go try to get the guy, my palms are a little sweaty. Yeah. Climbing scenes always do that to me. I just get that way. I can't help it. But yeah, and like you said, it peters out a little bit.
A good bow and arrow kill is always fun, though.
Yeah. Oh no, it's a good kill and everything. But God, I should have got Burt in the movie. I don't know.
You know what moment always made me really uneasy in this movie? When they're going down the river in the canoes and they pass the bridge where the kid with the banjo is. That they had just had such a great, fun time with, and they wave at him and he just stares at them.
Yeah.
And the canoes go under the bridge and he turns his head and just looks at them go away. And even like they're waving, they're like strumming the band, nothing.
Yeah.
It's so cold and just weird.
It's very unsettling.
Shall I move on?
Yeah.
So next up is The Getaway from 1972. Had you seen this one?
No.
I had never seen it either. Actually, I think I had seen it like right before the book came out. But I did rewatch it just yesterday in prep for this.
Well,
and
okay, I'm sorry.
like I say, I really enjoyed it.
It's good.
I'm a big fan of Jim Thompson's writing. I don't know if you've ever read.
We both have read The Killer Inside Me. You ever see that movie?
I haven't. No.
Pretty brutal. I've seen parts of it. It's
I
brutal.
like
Winterbottom.
Pop 1280. That's he wrote that as well.
Yeah, that sounded interesting.
Which is like a sheriff who just kind of manipulates the whole town.
That sounds awesome.
So maybe the first time I saw The Getaway, I hadn't read Jim Thompson, and I had after I watched it last night. You can really see the Thompson characters and story beats come through because he really does write like dark, like seedy, depressing, grotesque characters, and you see
The Killer Inside Me is fucking nuts.
And you see that I think, and I even read when I was going through this, they kind of backed off of that a little bit, that cynical edge. But
big time.
This movie, especially with the subplot involving the doctor and his wife, and it's fucking brutal.
Man, we got to get into that. Yeah, that is.
But obviously, The Getaway is Steve McQueen, directed by Peckinpah again, and Ali McGraw, it's a hilarious story about making this movie where whose girlfriend was she?
Well, I have it right here.
Evans?
It's my favorite Robert Evans quote, and this is when The Getaway would be McGraw's follow-up to Love Story, which is a huge movie.
Yeah.
Evans goes, "She may have been looking at me, but she was thinking about Steve McQueen's cock," which, hey, he was right. Like,
well, it's funny because I don't think Steve McQueen doesn't want her in this movie. She's
No.
she's totally wrong for it.
Right.
She's
But they had someone, Stella Stevens would have been great, right? And they met up for a drink, and McQueen's talking to her, and he goes, "I consider you competition." Bye-bye, Stella Stevens.
you ain't sharing the screen at me. We should also say it was supposed to be Bogdanovich who's going to direct it.
Yeah.
Which I guess him and McQueen don't really see eye to eye during pre-production.
Well, because he asked him, he's like, "What kind of gun am I going to hold?" He's like, "Don't worry about that." And McQueen knows guns and cars, like big time.
So
and he was like, "Fuck this guy."
Screenwriter Walter Hill, speaking to Quentin Tarantino about it, said Peter kept saying he wanted to turn it into a Hitchcockian type of adventure, which frankly I never understood. So. Yeah, it's Jim Thompson doesn't line up with Hitchcock thrillers.
Not really, no.
Yeah. And so, they fall out, and I guess Peckinpah's at a pretty low point in his career at this point, right?
I think so, yeah.
And all the pieces kind of come
We
together.
needed a hit.
Yeah, but producers really want Robert Evans, producer, wants Ali McGraw in the lead role. And she falls in love with Steve McQueen during filming. They have an affair, and it's odd because they have not much chemistry in this movie.
None. How did you think of? I mean, it's pretty famous at this point. How everyone, except for the French, apparently, according to Tarantino. But what'd you think about her in this movie?
She's not good. Yeah,
She's terrible.
Yeah,
she's awful.
Especially what the character needs to be, which is his character, Steve McQueen's character, asks his wife to get him out of prison and like do whatever it takes or something like that, and then he's kind of surprised to find out that she slept with the warden.
It was a little odd. Yeah, he bangs or she bangs Benyon. I forget
something
what his
like
name
that.
is.
Yeah.
He's on the parole board.
Yeah,
and he gets him out.
And it's like, what did you expect her to do? Your wife's a beautiful woman, and it kind of like gives a conflict in the movie, but it's kind of resolved quickly. It's not super. They don't really draw it out that much. And
it's not resolved that quick. I mean, she kills him.
No, yeah, that's what I mean. She kills him, but then like it more becomes about the two of them just trying to get away with this money.
There's one part where they're planning the heist, and she's kind of in the room with them, and I'm like, okay, here we go. I like it. Like the girl's in there with them planning it, and it goes nowhere. And then she just is not great in this movie. She shouldn't have been in the movie. She's bad, but it worked for Steve, I guess.
Have you ever seen the remake of this? Or
that is one that I think I told this before. I was at fucking aunt or uncle's house, I don't know, and someone was watching the remake on TV. Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger. When I walk in the room, I'm like, Alec Baldwin's got his face stuffed in her crotch. And I'm like, whoa! I was young. I'm like, what is this? I'm like, you could put your face there? Like, I didn't even know what sex was at the time. I'm like, holy shit. And then really quick, it's like, get out of the fucking room.
I used to always think that for men to do that, you had to go under the covers. Because any movie you ever saw it in, it had to be under the covers. You would just see like a head bobbing up and down. Like, what's it? Something happens under the covers. like fucking hot. You couldn't breathe, but it was like that's how you do it in the movies.
That's how you do it.
So yeah, The Getaway.
I think I never had.
Yeah, I know. I'm still guessing at
One
this
day.
point in my life. Who's the actor from The Godfather?
So Al Lettieri,
Yeah.
famously known as the Turk Sollozzo from The Godfather, plays like basically this Binion guy. He gets the Steve McQueen, Doc McCoy, right? Gets him out of prison so he's like, I want you to do a heist.
Right. And can we talk about real quick? It takes place on the San Antonio River. It's such a great scene. He's eating lunch on one of these.
And like he's like, these are the guys I want you to work with, and they come up on this little paddle boat. It's the stupidest scene. It's really funny. I don't think it's supposed to be funny, but it's stupid, very stupid.
No, and San Antonio comes back in Rolling Thunder, I believe it takes place.
Yeah, yeah.
And we've talked about our fondness for that town.
Cool
Great
town.
town.
Yeah.
And I love seeing it in movies.
But Al Lettieri's one of the guys he has to work with, and Al Lettieri was a big drinker. You can tell he's drunk in the movie. You could just tell.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he was butting heads with like Peckinpah because he was hammered. Tarantino does not like this cuckold subplot. I thought it was fucked up and funny.
It's incredibly fucked.
It's really fucked.
So he ends up. I missed the part. He goes to. Is it a doctor or a vet? Who's this guy that he finds?
He was a vet.
Okay.
I think he was a vet.
Yeah, because he's. I guess Bunyan instructs them to just.
Yeah, there was a double cross.
Yeah, kill everyone.
Right.
And Steve McQueen's character Doc sees this and thinks he kills this character who is Rudy Butler, and he doesn't. Despite the fact that he thinks he shoots him in the head. Like he goes after them. He wants the money now.
Right.
And he has to, because he was shot. He has to go to a vet, and he ends up hijacking them. And it's Sally Struthers and Jack Dodson is the guy's name, but he just becomes the perfect cuck in this scenario. And
Sally Struthers just almost immediately
is willing to like, and not only that, they're tying the husband up in these
Fucking in
motel
front
rooms
of him.
and fucking in front of him.
It is repulsive.
This is the Jim Thompson shit, though, that and apparently Tarantino says it's played more comedically up in the novel, which
I don't know. Here he says, speaking of the Rudy storyline, I'm not a fan. I really don't like Lettieri in this role. It's not that he's a bad actor or gives a bad performance. It's more I find his performance physically repellent. And it is.
It is.
But it's meant to be, I think. And then he goes, the whole section is ugly, and both Lettieri and Sally Struthers as his hostage turned sub Fran make you physically repel from the screen. Again, wasn't that the idea? I doubt it. And I'm like, what are you doubting?
Yeah, he says there's a sense of sadistic black comedy at play in the Rudy and Fran Dom sub theme in Thompson's novel that's absent in the film. I don't know.
I'd
how
have to
you
read
play
the
that.
book. Yeah, I don't. It's
because even the moment. So basically, at the tail end of their journey, Rudy's like, "Hey, hurry up in there," to the husband in the bathroom. Get out of there. He goes in there. And the guy hung himself on the shower curtain.
Yeah,
and it's almost like
it's not fun.
Cut and framed in a way it's supposed to be funny.
Okay, by the way, I was wrong. Peckinpah didn't have a problem with him. They go through this whole thing where Walter Hill is basically, he's like, I didn't like Al Lettieri in that role. And he goes, but having said all that, I feel I must point out Sam loved him in the role.
Yeah, another Walter Hill screenplay, by the way. So
yeah.
it's...
He's one we got to do a whole thing on.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, there was a few months ago when we were planning our movie catch-up for that month. I was like, I'm going to watch, I forget what it's called, Dead for something, Dead for $1 or something.
Oh, it's he's got the new one.
And you're like, what is that?
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
never mind, don't try. Like, I tried watching it. It's just not good. It's not good, man. He's just, he's doing a lot of those, like, Redbox type action movies now, and it's like, Walter Hill.
Got to get paid.
Brewster's Millions will probably come back too.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Which he did, so.
If I ever get the shot, which I won't, that'd probably be the movie I'd remake. You know why, too? It's a book, so I can claim it's an adaptation.
Yeah.
So to get back to the book, though, Jim Thompson, the other thing in the movie, the other thing that the movie famously loses is the surrealistic postscript chapter in El Rey. Are you familiar with what happens there? It says it in the book. In the book, they're Getaway to Mexico. They're going to the town of El Rey, which is almost like a crook's paradise, where it's like, it's a hideout town almost. But the thing is, it's not like some shithole like it's Sorcerer, where they're all hiding out in like this shitty backwater, like in South America or something. It's like a resort.
Yeah.
But everything costs a ton of money.
Because they know people have.
And inevitably, everyone runs out of money. And on the outskirts of El Rey, it's like a cannibal thing. So Doc and the woman, I forget her name, her stupid character, Ally McGraw, like they essentially devolve into this cannibalistic, whatever. It's obviously not in the movie.
That's the Jim Thompson, again,
Now, funny enough, if you recall, remember from Dusk Till Dawn, the Gecko brothers, Tarantino and Clooney,
Right.
where were they going?
Are they going to El Rey?
They're going to El Rey.
Wow.
So that's kind of cool. Cool. Him and Robert Rodriguez were big fans of the book.
Oh, that's cool.
And they were like, fuck, they never go to El Rey in the Getaway. Let's have our characters go to El Rey.
A creepy Quentin performance.
He's excellent in that movie.
Yeah.
He gets knocked as an actor.
Come sit in the bed. Come watch TV.
So good.
I love her head is just blown off, and when he comes back, you never know what happened. It's just like,
and you know what's funny? How he's seeing them say shit to them. It's so unrelated, but it almost reminds me of the Jon Favreau moment in PCU, where he's like he gets inadvertently stoned and he's wandering around like the town that the college is in, and some old lady comes up and she goes, "Can you blow me where the Pampers is?" She's not saying that, but he's great movie. Someone recommended that, by the way. That might be one to visit.
Yeah,
I love PCU. The bird dance, the wonderful bird dance. No one will get that.
But yeah, it's a good movie. I do like the ending is somewhat optimistic. As a man we've talked about in the show before shows up, Slim Pickens, and they kind of $30,000 I think he bargains they buy his truck and head off for the border, and they make it. So it's kind of a optimistic turn. Like you said, there's no El Rey sequence as is in the book, but
you can think about it. It's something
I always like when Slim Pickens shows up, and he's just perfect. Yeah,
it's a good movie. I think it's a little too long. Parts of it I didn't mind that though, like the train sequence. It plays out in kind of real time.
Oh, that's what I wanted to bring up.
I liked that. I found it pretty suspenseful.
So there's about maybe midway through this movie or closer to the end, they are at a train station. They're on the run from everyone, basically. The corrupt parole people, the police, everyone's after them. They're all over the news. And his wife accidentally gets conned and loses the money that they have.
Another Godfather alum.
So Doc comes back and he goes, "Where's the luggage?" And she goes, "Oh, it's in the locker. I put it." She opens up this lock, right? And there's no money in there. The look he gives her, it's...
You think he's going to hit her right there.
Dude, it's like he is seething with contempt. He just has this look on his face.
They're criminals.
Yeah.
That's such an...
He's like, it's the oldest trick in the book and you just fell for it.
It's the oldest trick in the book.
It's just the way I don't know. I don't know if they had begun their affair at this point, but he is looking at her with a seething hatred, and it's great. And again, we're talking about like moments that kind of shock you and take you out. When he puts the slip on this Rudy character and ends up knocking him out, and Sally Struthers' character just starts screaming in the hallway of the hotel they're at, he just whaps her right. He fucking hits her right in the face and knocks her out.
Yep.
It's great.
Yeah.
Because she is such a
she's their character.
Contemptible, disgusting character.
Awful character.
A few moments like that throughout this movie, though, where it's like, but man, when he looks at her she loses that money, and he gets it back. That's the amazing thing.
It is, and she waits.
Yeah,
I liked how that sequence played out. I think people have problems with that it's too long or whatever, but I like I said, it's suspenseful. I'm like, what the fuck is going to happen here? Yeah, because the train's leaving, and you're like, he's still on the train. Yeah. Weird thing here, I had to highlight this because this came up in my I'm a big conspiracy nut, and I was looking into propaganda overseas that we were doing during World War I, World War II, all that shit. I came across a guy called Walter Wanger, and I forget exactly. I don't have any notes in front of me when it comes to this, but he was overseas doing basically propaganda on. I think he was in Italy. So this is he's talking about Sam Peckinpah, where he came up, the world he came up in. This is a world where producer Walter Wanger would shoot Agent Jennings Langs in the balls for sleeping with his wife Joan Bennett. Very interesting, this Walter Wanger character. I would, if anyone wants to, little tidbit.
That's the way Quentin Tarantino's brain works. Just like, oh, by the way, here's a quick. I thought of this, so I'm gonna put it right in the book.
Dude,
here's a
like,
footnote.
It's one of those salacious Hollywood stories. I'm like, I'm surprised we don't hear about that more. It's crazy. Look into that story. But
I've shown you the video too. I told you for some reason love that Bill Maher podcast, but where Quentin Tarantino was trying to explain the plot of Blackula, and he's had a few drinks at this point. He's like, there's a count. And he's from the country, and it's so ridiculous sounding.
It is a ridiculous plot for sure.
But yeah, the Getaway, fun movie. I actually like this one better than Bullitt.
I like Bullitt more.
Yeah, it's not like you said. Alan McGraw kind of gives a almost film ruining performance, but I think there's enough good in this movie that makes it worth seeking out and checking out.
When the film came out in the States and England, McGraw was roasted by the critics, torn apart and ridiculed everywhere except France. He says, from the very beginning, the French always saw the film as a love story, and in France, the critics praised the emotional content of her performance. Perhaps. He says it took him 40 years to agree with that.
You can't cite a country that praises Jerry Lewis, so... Next up,
The Outfit
is The Outfit from 1973, which for me might have been my favorite discovery of this book.
Very cool movie. Yeah. Very, very cool movie.
And I don't like Point Blank.
It's funny. Let me see here. He does shit on. I like Point Blank, but he does shit on it, and I think he's kind of correct. But here we go. He's talking about the bad times. But the 80s were even worse. In the 50s, you could claim that it was a repressed society that imposed restrictions on Hollywood, their movies, and their artists. But in the 80s, the restrictions Hollywood imposed on their own product were self-imposed, which is where I feel like we're at now. It's all self-imposed.
Yeah.
It's like that's why nothing's happening. We're putting these weird restrictions on ourselves, and it's leading to just dishonesty.
Yeah.
Nothing's honest.
So if those don't know, The Outfit is based on the Parker character created by Donald Westlake, who's most known for probably Point Blank, but Lee Marvin plays him. But he's been in a ton. They've had this character almost always played by a different actor. Mel Gibson plays him in Payback. I think Jason Statham plays him in Parker. There's just been a ton of different adaptations for this character who's... I think Quentin Tarantino even basically says that De Niro's character in Heat is directly based on the Parker character.
Yeah.
So he's like a career thief, a career heist guy, and a lot of these movies that deal with Parker deal with him being double crossed, and I think that's the whole point of Point Blank is his girlfriend and partner betray him, and he kind of spends the whole movie seeking revenge. And this is kind of similar, but I think it's much more layered, and the characters are stronger, and I think Robert Duvall is a better Parker, and plus you have Joe Don Baker, who we just talked about.
And those two together are phenomenal. He says this about Point Blank: I've never understood the reputation that baby boomer critics assigned Borman's non-entity crime film. After the show-off opening, Point Blank settles down into 60s television. He's not totally wrong.
No.
It's kind of true. I like Point Blank. I think it has a lot going for it, but I can understand what he's saying there. It's a little flat.
There's a few, like Get Carter's another one where it's like, I wish they went a little bit harder at the revenge stuff. And this one, I love this one. I think it's so... The characters are stronger. I think the motivation is stronger.
Funny enough,
performances are better.
It starts off very similar to The Getaway. Like being released from prison.
Yeah.
And he gets picked up by a broad, too. It's Karen Black. Right, yeah. It's very similar to The Getaway, actually, the opening. But then it becomes somewhat different.
Yeah, and it's also just... I'd never heard of the term The Outfit before, and now I'm seeing it in a lot of movies where it's the crime, the outfit. I guess I'm not familiar with...
The crime?
Like the crime group is called The Outfit.
Sure. The
like
Syndicate.
Syndicate. I wasn't familiar with the term The Outfit, so it starts to come up in a lot of these movies, and yeah, again, I think Duvall just plays this role better.
He plays it very well, yeah. And Joe Don is fucking... It's really good. Those two have great chemistry together. And then, of course, the heavy in this movie is played by the great Robert Ryan, who couldn't look more annoyed.
Yeah.
And, like, in performance. Like, it's very good. Like, he's an older crime boss, so he's just like, I don't have time for this shit. Like, at all times, he's just like, just shut up. Like, it's great.
Yeah, I do love, too, I love scenes when there's a robbery and how they just kind of come in here, like, take this. It's very calculated. It's very smart. And I love to see when, like, this big crime syndicate realizes that someone's, like, taking their money.
Well, I have it highlighted here. You have the quote that it always makes me laugh. Do you know who runs this place? And it's like, they don't care. Yeah. They know exactly who runs the place. Like, funny enough, little thing here. He goes, it's Robert Ryan, not Marvin, Lee Marvin, who rises to the challenge of Eugene O'Neill's dialogue in The Iceman Cometh. You ever see that or read it?
I haven't, no.
I read it in high school. It is the most miserable. I love it. It's great. But I actually have seen Iceman Cometh, too, with these two. Robert Ryan's...
I kind of want to get into O'Neill more, but I feel like it's an acquired...
I don't know. I mean, look, a lot of it is like Iceman Cometh. It's dealing with like all these fucking, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like leftists, like early leftists, with the Wobblies and stuff. Reds gets into this a little bit because Eugene O'Neill's a character in that, and it's like their little artist clutch or whatever. But basically, Iceman Cometh is like the party's over. Like no one gives a shit about their dumb politics anymore, and they're all just drunks, and it's fucking miserable. It's really, really good though. I would highly recommend it. But John Flynn directs this movie, The Outfit.
Yeah. He ends up bringing up De Palma in this chapter as well. And we're going to get more De Palma. But he brings up a a movie we did on the show, Wise Guys.
Yeah.
Saying that De Palma was drawn and quartered for his toothless porn satire Body Double,
Which I love.
causing him to retreat to the silly mob comedy Wise Guys.
Yeah, it's weird to, I don't know. I always like, you're doing something bad. This like I don't know. Take it as the film. I don't know.
Well, this is where he starts to go on about the 80s. When it came time to artists whose film work was of an uncompromising nature in the 80s, you had David Lynch, Paul Verhoeven, Abel Ferrara, Terry Gilliam, Brian De Palma (parentheses sometimes), and David Cronenberg.
And that's it.
Yeah, and he talks about, Carpenter's one-off, like The Thing, Cruising, like those one-off movies. But yeah, he's overall not a fan of the 80s cinema.
I struggle to disagree with him.
Yeah.
I never was a huge fan of the 80s movies growing up. Like you said, here and there, sure. Like,
yeah.
I was 48 Hours 80s.
Yes.
I love that movie.
Walter Hill, though.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, the exception.
There you go.
You ever see Year of the Dragon?
No, and I have to. I got to get into him. You ever see Heaven's Gate by
No.
Cimino? Oh, it's great. Everyone hates it. I think it's phenomenal.
You need to watch the Yakuza, too, with Robert Mitchum. That's a good one. Yeah, so to get
Did Paul Schrader write that?
I think so.
I came away with a big appreciation of Paul Schrader. Not only that, I got drunk and I fucking spent $40 on his book, Transcendental Style and Film. It's sitting on my desk, so I have to watch. Like,
he's an interesting guy.
Oh, he's very interesting. He's like really shit talking these days.
Oh yeah.
I love it.
That's all he does anymore.
I love it. Speaking of that, here's a obscure shit talking from Tarantino, and then there's fish-faced Lloyd Bachner, the type of tight-lipped stiff who regularly appeared on Quinn Martin-produced TV shows. Any movie that casts Lloyd fucking Bachner has serious casting issues.
I just see Tarantino getting to the point going, Curly Joe Dorita is the best of the Stooges.
Oh,
He doesn't get that appreciation, but he's the best.
The fuck is Lloyd Bachner? I looked him up. I'm like, I don't, huh? He does not care for Lloyd Bachner,
He does
though.
not care for him.
Who else he doesn't care for? The first press clippings, this is for the outfit, aside from casting announcements, to appear about Flynn's film were almost all from fat hack James Bacon, who wrote in his syndicated column on blah, 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 blah. Apparently, you'd get a good notice from fat hack Bacon if you put him in your movie, which they would do. God damn. It's also incestuous.
It is. But yeah, I think even Quentin basically says that this is his favorite Parker film, and he's read a lot. I didn't know there's so many novels, it seems like. Again, well-read guy, has read a lot of these pulpy.
Yeah.
And I agree with him. I think this is a really interesting take on Parker, and it's certainly...
Oh, it's just fun watching guys knock off the mob,
yes.
too. They're just going around knocking off businesses, and they basically win in the end, too.
Yeah.
It looks like they're not going to...
And Robert Duvall is also in... He's in another
Godfather.
one. No, he's in... Secondhand Lions. He's in another one of these movies. I forget which. He's in a smaller part. It might be the Getaway.
Mm-mm.
No,
he's
in one of these movies for sure.
I feel like I know what you're talking about. It's
He's
not coming to
definitely
me.
in one of these movies. Well, maybe as we go through it, my memory will.
It's hard to not get lost in the sauce here. Oh, here's what you were talking about. Yeah, we're gonna skip this chapter. Second String Samurai, an appreciation of Kevin Thomas. And Kevin Thomas was kind of he was a film critic, but he would get the second run movies.
Sure.
He wouldn't get a stab at the big ones. And this is a good chapter. I'd recommend people read the book.
It's really interesting for me to realize that in the film criticism days, there were critics for the A tentpole movies, and then like your kind of lower,
And the idea is, this is why I always take criticism with a grain of salt, especially when there's money involved, is that the idea of critics was you want to be taken credibly enough. So when a small movie like The Outfit comes along, your reputation as someone who can, you can get a movie like this over.
Sure.
You can be like, well, hey, this is the thing. Come check this out. I'm sure Pauline Kael did a lot of that. She got a lot of movies over. I'm sure there's a collection of her writings.
There's a few.
I should just pick it up.
I think Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is a book of hers.
Really?
It has a lot, yeah.
But, so we'll skip this chapter. It's not a movie.
Yeah, he calls more attention to some movies you might not have, thought about. He does say, when I was writing my adaptation of Elmore Leonard's Rum Punch, which I retailed Jackie Brown, and I had to consider who was to play the novel's likable lead male character, bail bondsman Max Cherry, I had few choices. Gene Hackman and Paul Newman, and I also considered John Saxon. So he really, he learns a lot about casting people from reading these reviews early in his career and developing appreciation for actors. So that's interesting.
God, he went with Robert Forster.
Yeah.
I love Max Cherry. Such a good character. This next chapter we'll skip to. It's New Hollywood in the 70s. It's about the post-60s anti-establishment auteurs versus the movie brats. Interesting chapter. It's very easy risers, raging bulls.
There's one
Yeah, if you had anything in there, if you wanted
There's
to
something
touch
I
on.
saved where it was just a very quick note where he basically says, unlike the movie brats who followed them, these filmmakers didn't want to do their version of Psycho, or The Searchers, or Little Caesar, or Flash Gordon, or Bring That Baby. These directors wanted to do the more kind of artsy films, which I think is interesting. Like, because you have so many of these press generation, like, you know, Star Wars is basically a Flash Gordon inspired. So it's interesting to see that those movie brats were trying to remake basically movies that they grew up loving. And
right.
It changed a little bit.
Which is what he does.
Yeah, exactly. And thank God. Speaking of remaking a director whose style you really appreciate, next up is Sisters.
Sisters.
Which is 1973. Refresh my memory. Did you watch this when we did Wise Guys?
Yeah. Yep.
Did we talk about it?
Yeah.
I don't remember talking about it. But...
A little bit. Yeah. Well, we didn't. We were just starting to do like the oeuvre.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
of a whole
so
director. So we were kind of figuring it out as we went along.
Because you watched a lot of the early De Palma.
I watched everything up to Wise Guys and maybe some stuff after that.
He brings up those movies with De Niro, those early Greetings, I think. And
Hi Mom is fucking great.
You like Hi Mom.
I love Hi Mom. That he goes in here like that Be Black Baby sequence is fucking like bravura directing. It's really good.
I thought Sisters is basically a Hitchcockian-esque thriller of a woman who, from across her apartment, sees a man murdered. And the whole thing is there's these two twins, and one sister's like crazy, and the other one's not. And then,
they were Siamese.
Yeah, they're. I'm sorry, conjoined. Ryan, please.
Oh, right. Margot Kidder plays both roles. It's Margot Kidder, right?
Yeah, I thought for sure that it was going to end up she had like split personalities. I didn't think that that was going to be an actual twin, because they frame it that way.
Yeah, right. They do.
But it becomes, he employs a lot of really good technique here. The split screen.
That split screen sequence is fantastic.
Yeah. There's a lot in this movie, too, where you see the perspective of different characters in the same scene, split screen. He does that dual focus a lot, too, which is a really cool thing.
Yep.
It's a weird movie.
It is a weird movie.
Yeah.
I loved it. I thought it was really good.
It is a good movie, but it's out there.
One thing that's interesting about De Palma, and he says it right here, he goes, unlike Scorsese, Bogdanovich, and Spielberg, De Palma didn't pray at the altar of movies. To Brian, film was an artistic means to an end. And it's true. Like, I'm sure he went to movies like everyone else, but he didn't have like that, movies. He didn't exalt them.
He really is, I don't know, paying tribute to Hitchcock in this movie, though.
Tarantino gets into that. De Palma could tell what Hitchcock was able to do and the emotions he was able to get out of people, and that's what De Palma wanted.
One of my favorite, and I don't think it gets used enough in films, but it's the whole like protagonist switch like 20 minutes in, which is a really cool thing. Because I thought the guy, I forget his name,
the black guy, because the movie starts off, it's like a game show.
It's a game show,
and it's a weird game show. Yeah, and it's basically
it's like you ever see European Vacation, National Lampoon's. It begins with like a weird like pig game show that they're all on
because they win the trip, right? Yeah.
How else do you get them away on a trip?
But it's a really, because it's like a weird peeping Tom thing, and De Palma's notorious for being kind of a voyeur,
as is Hitchcock.
Yeah, that's true. But it's like this black guy, and he's in like a locker room. It's like a hidden camera show. Like, what would you do almost? And this blind girl starts...
Lyle Wilson.
Yeah. And he's good. He's great.
He's great, yeah.
But she starts undressing as if no one's in the locker room. And it's like, well, this sexy blind girl's getting undressed. What would you do? And he goes like, hey, like, I'm in here. And then it's revealed she comes out. I was acting, blah, blah. They end up going on a date. And it's kind of funny, too, because... Let me find my place here. The casting of a black male, Lyle Wilson, as the victim of the big set-piece murder sequence isn't satire, but actually a progressive stroke. And it's weird, because like there is that bit of like race mixing, like, black guy, like, you know, people think, blah, blah, blah. But the film's funniest racial joke is when the Peeping Tom contestants, Wilson and Killer Kidder, are given 2 free dinners at Manhattan's African Room, where black males in tuxedo tops and grass skirts serve as waiters. It's ridiculous. It's very funny, too. You're meant to laugh at it. It's very fucking silly.
But yeah, I like when it takes the switch, because I think that Jennifer Salt's character is a much more interesting protagonist.
Tarantino, I don't agree with you.
Yeah, I know that.
I didn't have a problem with her. She's annoying.
I like Charles Durning as well.
He's fucking excellent in this. He's just good. Like, man, I can't say enough. Tarantino agrees with me. He's like, Hi Mom is fantastic.
I gotta check it out.
I thought it was great. It's such a weird movie. And it takes the good parts of Greetings, which I did not like, and amplifies it. And I'm like, oh, it almost makes Greetings better.
There's a one of our early episodes when I come across that. It might be a sidetrack. I forget what it was, but I basically tell you, oh, you would. I read a description of this movie, and you would love it. And
It was high bomb.
It was self-fulfilling prophecy. There.
You were right. I liked William Finley as that weird doctor. When it's just a weird fucking movie.
I love that 70s blood when it looks like cake icing.
Yeah,
which is just like it's like putrid red. Like it looks like cream colored. I do love when he goes to the bakery and he wants to get "Happy Birthday" to the twins written on it, and one of the women's is Olympia Dukakis, which is she just looks like the type of person, an old bakery lady, because in South Philly there's a lot of these old pastry shops. You see women that look exactly.
Very true.
I love that little touch.
I was really surprised. I was like, this is awesome. Like, I really liked it. Maybe certain parts it gets a little like, okay, because you got an exposition and all that bullshit. But I dug it. I really, really liked it. And it got me like, I was like, all right, De Palma, he like rocketed to the top of my list.
Oh, wow.
I just like his movies are fucking great.
Yeah.
I think he's awesome. With the exception we'll get to in a second here when we get to our next film.
Which is Daisy Miller from 1974, which is the only movie that I did not watch when reading this book because I felt I knew enough about it to know I wouldn't enjoy it.
Well, you read the Henry James novel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Ryan instructed me. I said, I haven't watched Daisy Miller. He said, oh, you got to watch Daisy Miller for this episode. And I did. And I came out with it exactly as I expected I would.
What's what?
I didn't like it.
Why?
It's just, it's fucking boring. It's Sybil Shepherd is not good. It's just she's talking the whole time, rapid paced. It's that boring, self-indulgent Bogdanovich type of movie that I do not like. And look, I'm in the minority. I don't like The Last Picture Show. I think it's a similar thing.
I love that. I still haven't seen the movie. I love that book.
I think it's self-indulgent. I love a lot of his movies. Paper Moon is fantastic. What's Up, Doc? Is
Sybil
great.
Shepherd was hot,
She
dude.
was hot in this. She's great.
Hot.
She's just so annoying in this.
I'll tell you what.
The male guy is so annoying. Can I tell you the only bit of joy I got about this movie? When she's playing the piano and it's Pop Goes the Weasel. And I'm like, oh, I'm thinking of the Three Stooges now, so I'm in a good mood. It was the only part I really enjoyed. It's annoying. I know it's not the movie so much as the characters and the story and the book it's based on.
I will. Okay, real quick, just because I have this here. Obviously, like we said, it's an adaptation of the Henry James novel. Tarantino says so Scorsese would adapt Edith Wharton, Age of Innocence. Spielberg would adapt J.G. Ballard and Alice Walker, Empire of the Sun, Color Purple. Coppola would tackle Bram Stoker's most famous creation, which we tackled as well. Paul Schrader would adapt Mishima, which I gotta watch that fucking movie, man. The fact that I have it, I should just read Mishima too. What a weird guy. And direct Harold Pinter, and De Palma would fall on his face and never really get back up again after fucking up Tom Wolfe. Now, someone on Patreon had asked if we were going to do Bonfire of the Vanities. I've been reminded of Bonfire of the Vanities. I've been reading little passages here and there. It might be in my top 5 of books. It's so good. It's so prescient. It predicts everything. It's a brutal, brutal book. Super honest.
All right. Let me ask you this, because me and you usually fall pretty in line on book recommendations. Except you recommended a book, and I couldn't get through it.
What was it?
Blood Meridian.
Well, okay. Look,
that was such a conflicting reaction there. Like, oh, you piece of shit. Oh wait, I understand.
I understand. I've read. I just finished Such Read by Cormac McCarthy, which was good. It was miserable. Fuck, did I read something else by him?
It wasn't the misery as much as the format. I just couldn't wrap my head around.
I would recommend going back and trying it again.
No.
It gets...
I got 2/3 of the way through and I had to give up on it.
Wow, you're
I know. And
you're a Philistine.
People loved
it. It's my favorite book.
I couldn't get it, and then I was like, you know what? I'm going to try listening to the audiobook. Maybe that will help me. It was even worse.
I couldn't.
Because it was read by a guy who talked like this in the Cormac McCarthy. Like, he just... I could read a chapter in 15 minutes. His readings were taking 45 minutes for a chapter, and I was just like...
I can understand why people would find Cormac McCarthy tough to read.
Yeah.
I get it. He doesn't use punctuation.
Right.
You don't know who's talking sometimes. I finished Blood Meridian. I think I went right back to the first page the first time and started again. I've read the book like five, 6 times. I love it's like comfy to me.
All right, well,
it's not a comfy book, by the way.
Bonfire of the Vanities. You think I would enjoy that more than
100%.
Okay.
No, it reads like a novel.
Because I really want to read the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test 2.
I've read that twice.
Well, I like Ken Casey, isn't he?
Casey.
Yeah,
is the character. Go ahead. I think you would. I'll put it to you this way. Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test is closer to how Blood Meridian's written.
Oh, then I shall be reading that one.
Yeah. And it's like, trust me, dude, I don't know. I have no love for the hippie generation. just like the end of Easy
I was
Rider.
gonna say, what are you, Joe?
Oh, yeah, we blew it. I am. But they blew it. Whatever goodwill or good vibes, they totally blew it, and they're the monsters we have today that we're dealing with.
Boomers?
In so many words.
Boomers hate me because I attempt to educate on comedy they grew up with. So they think I'm just a shit-nosed millennial who, I get a lot of comments from them on YouTube.
No, you don't.
I do. I swear to God. They don't like me.
I don't understand that.
Yeah.
Whatever. There's another group that you've been at loggerheads with. We'll go unnamed for the...
Chris Pratt fans?
All that, but... for the moment.
Anyway, yeah, so...
But where was I going with that?
Bonfire of the Vanities.
No, but we got to talk about this a little bit more. It's tough to read. If you're not... I get it. It's dreamlike and stuff. Bonfire of the Vanities...
I had no idea it was happening most of the time. I had no idea who was talking. I think that's what just did it for me.
I can understand that. Bonfire of the Vanities is a straight novel. Mm-hmm. You will understand.
Okay.
It's really
but
fucking good.
We do get requested that a lot.
He dropped the ball so bad on that movie. It's not even... I love De Palma. It should have fucked his career up. It should have. He really fucked that movie up. And if you read The Devil's Candy, another book, which is all about the making, reporter Julia Salmon had... De Palma was like, you can follow me around, you can do whatever, write whatever you want. She writes it all. Every step of the way, he made the wrong choice. Like every step of the way, dude.
There's a lot of
wasting money, idiotic casting, and it sucks too because you can. The movie
we did get nothing but trouble as a result because Warner Brothers executives were so distracted by that Nothing But Trouble became what it is.
It's a shame. It's a very visually interesting movie, but if you read Bonfire of the Vanities and then watch, you'll be angry. It blows the whole premise of the book. I'm going to check the book out, though. You should. It's fucking astounding. It's astoundingly good.
But that's a good point that all these directors were trying to make these literature adaptations at this point. And again, Bogdanovich is very hit or miss for me.
I can understand that.
I recently watched a movie of his called Noises Off, it reminded me of like a Frasier episode. It's like a stage play with a lot of like people coming in and out of doors. And like
Neil Simon?
No.
Oh, it's not.
I don't think it is. I could be wrong.
I could be wrong.
It's like, but it takes place behind the scenes. Michael Caine, your buddy John Ritter's in it. And
we've gotten recommended that.
Yeah. But I would love to do Nickelodeon on the show because everything I've read about Nickelodeon.
Have you seen it?
I haven't.
It's great.
Yeah,
I would love it. Oh, it's really good.
Little Bert.
So, to what you were saying, how you didn't like this movie, here's Tarantino. The tone of the opening scene between Barry Brown's Winterborn and Daisy's 9-year-old brother Randolph is a little off-putting. You see what Peter is trying to accomplish, but you're not sure it's going to work. A little off-putting? That kid is so fucking annoying.
It's awful.
And I'm sitting there like, I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, the movie just started. I'm like, oh no. I'm like, it's going to be like this the whole time. The rhythm picks up. I think it starts to work. All the Howard Hawks, rapid-fire dialogue that Bogdanovich loves. I think it like Cloris Leachman repeating herself over and over.
I was going to say, Cloris Leachman and what's her name are the best parts of this movie. Eileen Brennan.
I like this movie, man. I thought it developed to a point where, like I said, the rhythm of the performances, you start to get in the groove. The story starts to unfold a little bit. I'm fairly interested in that era period. I like the idea of like American expats abroad, like the wealthy expats.
Have you read Henry James?
No.
Okay.
No, I haven't. I mean, like I said, I've read so many fucking books.
Yeah.
You can't read everything.
Right.
It just, whatever. He gets into Barry Brown here that plays Frederick Winterborn, though, the guy who's kind of courting Daisy. And it's a weird courtship. They're not really courting each other. It's an odd film. But Brown was also, surprisingly enough, a genre film scholar who wrote regularly for the horror film magazines Castle of Frankenstein, the Fangoria of the late 60s and early 70s, and Magic Theater, including in Castle of Frankenstein, issue number 10, a wonderful piece that chronicles Bela Lugosi's descent into morphine addiction, which he includes in this book.
Which is great.
Which is nice. A nice little tribute to Barry Brown. Apparently he was in a movie, too. He mentions it here with Jeff Bridges called Bad Company, which gets that tag of an acid western.
Yeah.
I got to check that out. It's probably pretty good. But I like Daisy Miller. I came away with it like, oh, that was good. With the very sad ending.
Yeah, very sad.
Very, very sad ending.
It's also, it's pretty short. It does move fast. It's not like, it's not for what you'd expect from this like heavy type of period movie. It's not
Even
super...
the little brother, you start to kind of like, I know you probably didn't, but it becomes tolerable.
I think Bogdanovich was dating Sybil Shepherd.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, around this point.
Famously left his wife, who they were kind of a
Great taste in women, that Peter Bogdanovich.
He did have good taste.
He'll come back in that Orson Welles book because
Oh, yeah,
Orson
big
talks
time.
about him quite a bit.
Big time.
And the diatribe he wrote apparently is what I think Orson called it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I like Bogdanovich a lot. I like him more as like a cinema, like much like Tarantino, a fan of cinema, a champion of cinema. I think that Buster Keaton documentary he did is fantastic. I think some of his early movies are great. There's something about this just didn't. It's definitely not the worst movie in this book.
No.
But it was just not something I was not for me.
Yeah, fair enough. I kind of like just the milieu of it. Like I said, I could see like you're like, I'm not interested by this.
So we're about halfway through the movie picks here, so I think what we should do is make this a two-parter. I didn't think we'd have this much to say, but there's some great movies in the second half of this book and some not so great ones. But why don't we take a pause and we'll discuss the rest?
Yeah, a little easier to listen to. You know, you don't have a one giant block of...
We'll split this up, so stay tuned because we're going to come back with part 2 of Quentin Tarantino's Cinema Speculation.